Hi guys, we all have our own journey in sim racing, and mine is quite a long and winding road. I'm pretty long in the tooth. In this video series, I'm going to be recounting some of the standout games that started me out on this journey, and some of those milestones along the way, like the first game I played with a racing wheel, for example. And then we'll move on to what games in the modern era have rekindled this joy of sim racing for me. This episode is going to be about the game Geoff Crammond's Grand Prix 2, released in 1996, so it's about 25 years old. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why I loved this game, what qualities it had that set it apart from other games at the time, and then how I got it installed on Windows 10. If you're interested in seeing the follow-up videos in this series, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Why Grand Prix 2? Like many other sim racers, I'm a bit of a motorsport nut. I've been obsessively following Formula 1 and other categories of motorsport since pretty much the time I can first remember. And this obsession led me on to having a look at what games might be available to me on my PC. This PC was primarily used for study, but I wanted to use it for other things too. I happened upon a demo of Geoff Crammond's Grand Prix 2 attached to a PC gaming magazine, as you did back then, and I was hooked on it pretty much immediately. On release, I didn't hesitate to buy a copy of this game. It was in this huge green box with a massive manual, as was quite common back in those days. And I spent many an hour then going through customizing the game, reintroducing legends like Ayrton Senna, which you could do if you had access to the internet and had enough know-how to copy files across. It also had some cool features like hot seat mode, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. The level of customization alone in this game kept it going for me well beyond when Grand Prix 3 came out. And I'd say it was the first game that introduced me to the concept of a community to back it up. And all this was way back in 1996. So I did very briefly mention hot seat mode. What is this and why was it important to the game? Well, hot seat mode, which was, I believe, in previous Geoff Crammond games, is essentially a way to have turn-based play in a single player game environment. So you could have multiple players just taking their turns playing that game. However, it did open the doorway to being able to play that game remotely. You could save your file as you were about to stop playing as that particular driver, and then email it across to your friend who could continue from that point. It wasn't without its troubles, though. I remember losing many a race to the AI clumsily falling off the road after it had taken over in hot seat mode. But it still opened up new doors to people beyond family members or people that you went to school with. To me, though, the biggest and best feature of Grand Prix 2 actually had very little to do with the game itself. It was the instruction manual. Who'd get excited about an instruction manual, you might ask? But I guess that depends on your point of view. For the most part, games back in the 90s had huge manuals that you would flick through a couple of pages, throw them away, and get straight into gaming. However, simulations were kind of the exception to that rule. They had epic manuals, which had a lot of detail in them. Not only the usual quick start guide, how to set up your hardware, installation, troubleshooting woes, but it also had a lot of detail on racing and race history. It had sections on dealing with car setup and how to respond to certain behavior with the car, race flags and what they mean, driving techniques. It also had historic references to the drivers and the teams that took part in the 1994 championship, along with their finishing position within the championship itself. So spend a bit of time talking about the game. Maybe it's piqued your interest, maybe it hasn't. However, I really wanted to play this game again, so I went through the steps of how to install it. I thought I'd just follow through those for you guys. So I dug out a copy of Grand Prix 2 put the CD, yes, it is on CD, into the drive, closed it up, tried to auto-run the disk, nothing happened. I tried double-clicking the executable file for setup, and I got a warning saying that this particular file is not executable by Windows 10. Sad times indeed. But I kind of expect this to happen because it was a DOS game, and DOS games don't generally work well on Windows. So I looked at my options here and found that there are lots of builds of something called DOSBox. Now I'm not going to go through how to install DOSBox and how to configure it, so I have dropped an instruction link in the description for you to run through that. But having picked a version of DOSBox, which is an SVN build by Dorm, I grabbed that, installed it, and then set about running setup again. Setup again did not work. But on investigation as to why it didn't work, I found that the files that are used by GP2 just sit on the drive anyway. So I copied them across to my hard drive and was able to, after dropping a no CD crack onto the executable, run the game. Initially I had no sound, and there is a no CD setup tool to set up your sound, which I also installed. Both of those, incidentally, are also in the description. With all that done, I was able to load up the game in Super VGA mode and play it, albeit using keyboard controls. Why keyboard controls, you might ask? Well, this is where you start to really feel the game creaking a little bit due to its age. Back in 1996, there were very few dedicated sim racing devices out there. You had joysticks and not much else really. And the joystick support in this game is quite limited. Actually, in DOSBox, it's pretty limited. So my ridiculously complex 6-controller layout really was never going to work with this setup. And that doesn't bother me too much because I played GP2 on keyboard back in the day anyway, so I remember how it worked, and I was pretty comfortable with those controls. Honestly, I had a blast playing through GP2 again, and I will pick it up occasionally. I've got it installed. It doesn't take up much disk space, and running it is a doddle with everything set up. It plays surprisingly well for a 25-year-old game. Sure, the sound effects these days are pretty basic, the graphics look terrible, but we are talking about something that is so old that it is a classic. The game instruction manual, flicking through it again, it made me realise just how much I'd forgotten over the last 25 years. And that snapshot in time of events from 1994 really kind of brought out that history and made me eager for more of that kind of thing. Having that driving advice within those pages is well worth it too. So I hope you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane, and if you have, please give this video a big thumbs up. Don't forget to leave some comments below if, for example, you managed to get it working with a joystick or with your steering wheel. That would be fantastic for people to hear about. Or if you've used different settings to what I did here, that would also be really worth talking about. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to watch my next episodes down memory lane. And until next time, goodbye for now, guys.